When your fiancé spends your entire engagement wishing you were someone else, death feels like freedom from a prison you built yourself. But when you wake up 3 years earlier with the power to prevent your own tragedy, you realize the sweetest revenge is giving him exactly what he claims to want, and watching him realize too late what he's lost. My name is Catherine Ross, and I died at 31 from complications during emergency surgery, alone in a hospital room while my husband of 8 years held his best friend, Melissa's hand in the waiting room, praying for her recovery from a minor procedure instead of being with me during my final moments. The last thought I had before everything went dark was how fitting it was. I had spent our entire relationship coming second to Melissa, so why should my death be any different? But when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't dead. I was 28 years old, sitting in my childhood bedroom, staring at the engagement ring on my finger that I'd just received the night before. Through my window, I could see my fiancé Derek Mitchell's car pulling away from the driveway, and I could hear my mother downstairs gushing to my father about what a wonderful match we were. I had been given a second chance, and this time I wasn't going to waste 3 years of my life loving a man whose heart belonged to someone he claimed was just a friend. In my previous life, I had been so desperate to believe Derek's lies. When he said Melissa was like a sister to him, I believed it even as he dropped everything to rush to her side whenever she called. When he said I was being paranoid and jealous, I believed it even as he scheduled our entire life around Melissa's availability. When he said he loved me and wanted to marry me, I believed it even as he looked at her with an intensity he never showed me. I had been a fool. A desperate, lovesick fool who had convinced herself that patience and understanding would eventually make Derek see what he had with me. This time I knew better. I looked down at the engagement ring, a modest diamond that Derek had been so proud of, telling me he'd saved for months to buy it. In our previous timeline, I'd worn this ring for 3 years before our wedding, treasuring it like a promise of the happy future we'd build together. Now looking at it with clear eyes, I could see it for what it really was, a placeholder. Something to keep me occupied and invested while Derek figured out whether he could actually have the woman he really wanted. I twisted the ring off my finger and set it on my nightstand. Then I picked up my phone and sent Derek a text. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. at Riverside Cafe. It's important." His response came within seconds. "Is everything okay? You seemed happy last night." I had been happy last night in my previous timeline. Deliriously, pathetically happy because I'd thought Derek proposing meant he'd finally chosen me over his eternal comparison to Melissa. I typed back, "Everything's fine. Just need to discuss something. Can't we talk now? You're making me nervous." "Tomorrow," I replied, and turned off my phone. That night, I lay awake thinking about the 8 years I'd wasted in my previous life. The wedding I'd planned around Melissa's schedule because she's my best friend, Kat. She has to be there. The honeymoon we'd postponed because Melissa was going through a breakup and needed Derek's support. The countless dinners interrupted by her phone calls. The vacations canceled because she needed help moving. The intimate moments ruined because Derek was distracted thinking about her problems. And through it all, I had smiled and been understanding and told myself that this was what love looked like. Sacrifice and patience and putting your partner's needs first. What I hadn't understood was that Derek's needs weren't about me at all. They were about maintaining his fantasy that someday Melissa would wake up and realize she loved him too. The next afternoon, I arrived at Riverside Cafe 15 minutes early and chose a table by the window where everyone could see us. In my previous life, I'd learned that Derek cared deeply about appearances and public opinion. He'd want to avoid making a scene. Derek arrived exactly on time, looking anxious and confused. He was handsome in that clean-cut, all-American way that had initially attracted me. Tall, athletic build, perfect smile. The kind of man who looked like he belonged in a toothpaste commercial. "Kat," he said, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my head so his lips caught my cheek instead. His eyes widened slightly. "What's wrong?" "Sit down, Derek." He sat, his confusion deepening. "You're scaring me. Did something happen? Did I do something wrong?" I pulled the engagement ring from my purse and placed it on the table between us. Derek stared at it like I'd just produced a live grenade. What are you doing?" he stammered. "I'm giving you what you want," I said calmly. "Freedom to be with the person you actually love." Kat, what are you talking about? I love you. I just asked you to marry me. You asked me to marry you because Melissa started dating someone seriously and you panicked, I said. You asked me to marry me because you needed to prove to yourself and everyone else that you'd moved on from her. Derek's face went through several shades of pale. That's not. I don't know what you're talking about. Melissa is my friend. Melissa is the woman you've been in love with since college, I interrupted. Melissa is the reason you look distracted whenever we're together. Melissa is the person whose opinion matters more to you than mine. Melissa is the woman you wish I was. That's insane, Derek said, but his voice was shaking. You're being paranoid, Anne. I'm being clear-sighted for the first time in our relationship, I said. Derek, I'm not angry. I'm not hurt. I'm just done pretending. Pretending what? Pretending that I don't see the way you look at her. Pretending I don't notice how you light up when she texts you. Pretending I don't hear the difference in your voice when you talk to her versus when you talk to me. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Kat, you're misunderstanding. Melissa and I have history, yes, but it's not romantic. She's like family to me. Then why did you schedule our engagement party around her availability instead of your own parents? I asked. Why did you insist on postponing our engagement announcement for 2 weeks, so it wouldn't overlap with her birthday? Why do you have 3 different group chats that include her but none that include me? Derek's face was now completely white. Have you been checking my phone? I haven't needed to check your phone, I said. Everything I just mentioned, you told me yourself. You just didn't realize how it sounded. Derek was silent for a long moment, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I love you, he said finally, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. Maybe you do, I agreed. Maybe you love me in whatever capacity you have available after reserving the best parts of your heart for someone else. But I deserve to be someone's first choice, Derek. Not their backup plan. You're not a backup plan, Derek protested weakly. Then why does it feel like I'm competing for my own fiancé's attention? Derek had no answer for that. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up. I'm calling off our engagement. You're free to pursue Melissa without guilt or obligation. And I'm free to find someone who actually wants to be with me. Kat, wait. Derek grabbed my hand. Please don't do this. We can work through this. I'll set better boundaries with Melissa. I'll make more time for us. I'll prove to you that you're my priority. I looked down at his hand on mine, remembering how many times in my previous life he'd made similar promises. How many times he'd sworn things would change, only for Melissa's next crisis to derail all his good intentions. Derek, the fact that you need to prove I'm your priority tells me everything I need to know, I said gently. A relationship shouldn't require constant proof of basic consideration. Everyone has to work at relationships, Derek argued. Everyone has to make efforts and compromises. Compromise is deciding whether to have the wedding in spring or fall, I interrupted. Compromise is choosing between 2 vacation destinations. Compromise is not accepting that you'll always come second to another woman. I pulled my hand from his grasp and walked away, leaving the ring on the table and Derek staring after me in shock. I expected to feel devastated. In my previous timeline, even the thought of losing Derek had been enough to send me into panic attacks. I had built my entire identity around being his understanding girlfriend, his patient fiancée, his supportive wife. Instead, I felt light, free. Like I'd just put down a weight I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. My phone started ringing before I even got to my car. Derek, obviously. I declined the call and blocked his number. Then I drove to my best friend Sarah's house. Sarah had been the only person in my previous life who'd ever questioned my relationship with Derek. She gently pointed out that I seemed to be doing all the emotional labor, that Derek seemed more invested in Melissa than in me, that I deserved someone who was excited about me. I'd dismissed her concerns, convinced she just didn't understand the complexity of adult relationships. Now I rang her doorbell and waited. Kat. Sarah opened the door, surprise on her face. I thought you'd be busy wedding planning. Oh my God, what's wrong? I realized I was crying. Not sad tears, but tears of relief so profound they'd spilled over despite my best efforts to contain them. I called off the engagement, I said. Sarah's eyes widened. What? When? What happened? Can I come in? 2 hours later, I'd told Sarah everything. Not about being reborn, obviously, but about finally seeing clearly how one-sided my relationship with Derek had been. I should have said something stronger, Sarah said, guilt written all over her face. I should have staged an intervention or something. I knew he was treating you terribly. You tried, I said. I wasn't ready to hear it. Some lessons you can only learn by living through them. So what now? Sarah asked. How are you feeling? Honestly? Free, I said. Like I just dodged a bullet I didn't even know was coming at me. Good, Sarah said firmly. Because you deserve so much better than a man who can't decide between you and his best friend. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'd blocked Derek, but apparently he'd borrowed someone else's phone. Kat, please talk to me. I'm at your parents' house and they're confused and upset. Your dad wants to know what happened. Can you at least call them? I'd forgotten about my parents. In my previous timeline, they'd adored Derek. My father especially had been thrilled that I was marrying such a solid, responsible young man. I called my parents. Catherine, my mother answered on the first ring. Derek is here and he says you broke off the engagement. Please tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Mom. I called it off. But why? My mother wailed. Derek is perfect. He has a good job, he's handsome, he comes from a good family. He's in love with someone else, I said bluntly. Silence on the other end. That's ridiculous, my father said. He must have been on speakerphone. Derek is devoted to you. He's been courting you properly for 2 years. He's been using me as a placeholder while he waits for his best friend to decide she wants him, I interrupted. And I'm not interested in being someone's backup plan. Catherine, you're being dramatic, my mother said. Every couple has friends. You can't expect Derek to give up his friendships just because you're jealous. I'm not asking him to give up his friendships, I said. I'm acknowledging that he's emotionally unavailable for a real relationship because he's emotionally invested in someone else. This is that Sarah's influence, isn't it? My mother said sharply. She's always been jealous of your relationship, always trying to. Sarah has been the only person honest enough to point out that I deserve better, I interrupted. And I'm done having this conversation. I've made my decision. I hung up before they could respond. Over the next week, I ignored dozens of calls and texts from Derek, my parents, and several well-meaning friends who'd heard about the broken engagement and wanted to help us work things out. I also blocked Melissa, anticipating that she'd eventually reach out with some performance of concern. Instead, I focused on myself for the first time in years. I went back to the gym, something I'd neglected in my previous timeline, because I'd been too busy accommodating Derek's schedule. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from because Derek found them dramatic or negative. I started looking at apartments of my own, even though I technically still lived with roommates. Most importantly, I started therapy. I want to understand why I accepted such an unbalanced relationship. I told my new therapist, Dr. Martinez. I want to understand what made me think that was love. Dr. Martinez was thoughtful and non-judgmental. And over our sessions, I began to unpack the patterns that had made me vulnerable to Derek's emotional manipulation. You're describing a classic case of situational codependency, Dr. Martinez said during our third session. You derived your sense of worth from how well you could meet your partner's needs, even when those needs were unreasonable. Why did I do that? Often it stems from early experiences with conditional love, being taught that you had to earn affection by being useful or accommodating. I thought about my childhood, about my father's praise always being tied to achievements or good behavior, my mother's love expressed through approval of my choices rather than unconditional acceptance. So I learned to prove my worth by sacrificing myself, I said slowly. Many people do, Dr. Martinez said. The question is, do you want to keep doing that? No, I said firmly. I want to believe I have inherent worth, regardless of what I can do for others. That's excellent self-awareness, Dr. Martinez said. That's where we'll start. 6 weeks after I'd called off the engagement, I ran into Derek and Melissa at a coffee shop. I was with Sarah, celebrating my new job offer at a prestigious marketing firm. Derek and Melissa were sitting in a corner booth, their heads close together, deep in conversation. Derek saw me first. His face went through shock, longing, and something that might have been guilt. Melissa followed his gaze and saw me. Her expression was harder to read. Surprise, certainly, but also something calculating. I nodded politely at them and turned my attention back to Sarah. Is that them? Sarah whispered. Yes. Do you want to leave? No, I said. I'm not letting them run me out of my favorite coffee shop. 2 minutes later, Derek appeared at our table. Kat, he said. Can we talk? I'm busy, I said pleasantly. Please. Just 5 minutes. I looked at Sarah, who gave me a your choice shrug. 5 minutes, I agreed, standing up. Sarah, I'll be right back. Derek and I walked outside into the cool evening air. You look good, Derek said. Different. I am different, I agreed. I'm happy. Derek flinched. Kat, I've been miserable without you. Everything you said was right. I was taking you for granted. I was being unfair. Derek, why are you telling me this? Because I want you back, he said desperately. I ended things with Melissa. You were together? I interrupted. Not like that, Derek said quickly. I mean, I stopped spending so much time with her. I set boundaries like you wanted. I've been going to therapy. That's great, Derek. I said genuinely. I'm glad you're working on yourself. So you'll take me back? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt absolutely nothing. No love, no anger, no longing. Just a mild fondness for a person I used to know. No, I said gently. Why not? Derek demanded. I'm doing everything you wanted. I'm changing, I'm growing. Because you're doing it to get me back, not because you actually want to change, I said. And because even if you had genuinely changed, I've moved on. You're seeing someone? Derek asked, and there was an edge to his voice now. No, I said. But I'm seeing myself clearly for the first time in years. And what I see is a woman who deserves to be someone's first choice, not their project or their backup plan. I never saw you as a backup plan, Derek protested. Maybe not consciously, I agreed. But Derek, you proposed to me 2 weeks after Melissa started dating someone seriously. You can't tell me that was a coincidence. Derek's silence was all the answer I needed. I hope you find happiness, I said sincerely. I hope you figure out what you really want and have the courage to pursue it. But I won't be waiting to see if I'm it. I walked back into the coffee shop, leaving Derek standing on the sidewalk. How do you feel? Sarah asked when I sat down. Like I just closed a book I should have finished reading years ago. 3 months after calling off the engagement, I'd settled into my new apartment, excelled at my new job, and started actually enjoying my life instead of just surviving it. I'd also started dating casually. Nothing serious, just exploring what it felt like to be with men who were actually interested in me, not in who they wished I could be. That's when I met James Chun at a work conference. James was everything Derek wasn't, emotionally available, genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions, and refreshingly honest about his feelings. I think you're fascinating, he told me on our 3rd date. The way your mind works, the way you approach problems. You're like a puzzle I actually want to solve, not because you're difficult, but because you're complex and interesting. That's the best compliment I've ever received, I said, meaning it. Really? James looked surprised. What kind of compliments are you used to? I thought about Derek's compliments in our previous timeline. You're so understanding, you're so patient, you're so low maintenance. All code for thank you for not having needs that inconvenience me. The kind that praised me for being easy, I said. For not being demanding or complicated. That sounds lonely, James said perceptively. It was, I admitted. Well, I like that you're complicated, James said. I like that you have opinions and needs and boundaries. Simple people are boring. I didn't fall for James immediately. I'd learned my lesson about rushing into things. But over the next 6 months, he proved himself to be consistent, reliable, and genuinely devoted. Not in the desperate, clinging way Derek had been after I'd left him, but in a steady, secure way that made me feel valued rather than worshipped. 1 year after calling off my engagement to Derek, James and I were having dinner at an upscale restaurant when Derek and Melissa walked in. They were clearly on a date, dressed up, holding hands, laughing together. They looked happy in a way Derek and I had never looked together. James noticed me notice them. "Is that your ex?" "Yes," I said. "And the woman he was in love with while we were together?" James studied them for a moment. "They look right together." "They do," I agreed. "Does it bother you?" I thought about it honestly. No. I'm glad he's happy. I'm glad they're happy. I'm mostly just glad I'm not trying to compete with her anymore. "Good," James said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Because you never should have had to compete for someone's affection. That's not how love works." "How does it work?" I asked. "Like this," James said simply. "Where I see you walk in a room and my whole day gets better. Where I want to know what you're thinking even when you're quiet. Where I choose you not because you're convenient or because I can't have who I really want, but because you're exactly who I want." I felt tears prick my eyes. That's how I want to love too. Then we're doing this right. Derek noticed me at some point during dinner. I saw him do a double take, saw him take in James, saw the flash of something that might have been regret cross his face. I smiled and raised my glass in a small toast. Not mocking, not bitter, just acknowledgement. He nodded back, and then turned his attention back to Melissa. "That was mature of you," James observed. "I'm not angry at him anymore," I said. "He wasn't a villain. He was just a man who didn't know what he wanted and hurt people because of it." "And now he's figured it out?" "I hope so," I said. "Everyone deserves to be with the person they actually want." 2 years after calling off my engagement, James proposed to me on a beach in Hawaii. No dramatic production, no public spectacle, just the two of us watching the sunset. "I love you," he said. "Not because you've been patient with me or because you've sacrificed for me, but because you're brilliant and kind and funny and challenging. Because you make me want to be better without making me feel like I'm not enough as I am. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it." "Yes," I said before he even got the ring out of his pocket. Our wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family. Sarah was my maid of honor, and she cried through the entire ceremony. "I'm so happy for you," she said afterward. "This is what you always deserved." "I know," I said. "I just had to learn it myself first." On our honeymoon, as James and I lay on a beach in Bali, he asked me about my previous relationship. "What made you finally leave?" he asked. "What was the moment you realized you deserved better?" I thought about how to answer without revealing the impossible truth, that I'd lived through years of misery before getting a second chance to rewrite my story. "I realized that love shouldn't feel like constantly proving your worth," I said finally. "I realized that the right person wouldn't make me compete for their attention, or question whether I was enough." "How did you get that clarity?" "I imagined my future," I said. "I imagined spending my life with someone who saw me as a backup plan. I imagined raising children who would learn from our example that love means settling. I imagined dying without ever knowing what it felt like to be someone's first choice." It was as close to the truth as I could get. "I'm glad you found the courage to leave," James said. "I'm glad you decided you deserved more." "Me too," I said. 5 years into my marriage with James, I ran into Derek at a professional conference. He was presenting on a panel about entrepreneurship. Apparently, he'd started his own tech company and was doing quite well. We ended up in the same elevator after his panel. "Kat," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I heard you were married. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said. "I heard you and Melissa finally made it official. Congratulations to you too." "We did," Derek said, and for the first time in all the years I'd known him, he looked genuinely content. It took us a while to figure out what we were to each other, but we got there eventually. "I'm glad," I said sincerely. "Kat," Derek said as the elevator descended, "I owe you an apology. A real one." "You don't." "I do," he interrupted. "I was a coward. I was in love with Melissa, but too afraid to risk our friendship by telling her. So I dated you and convinced myself I was being fair to you, because I didn't technically cheat. But I cheated you out of years of finding someone who could love you properly. I appreciate that, I said. The thing is, Derek continued, breaking up with you was the best thing for both of us. I had to lose you to realize I was treating you like a placeholder. And losing you made me finally tell Melissa how I felt, because I realized that life's too short to love people halfway. That's very mature of you, I said. I grew up, Derek said simply. Too late for us, but hopefully not too late for me to be the person Melissa deserves. The elevator doors opened. For what it's worth, I said as I stepped out. I hope you two are really happy together. Not in a bitter way, genuinely. Because if you'd been honest with both of us from the start, everyone would have suffered less. Agreed, Derek said. And Kat? I hope you're happy too. You always deserved better than what I gave you. I am happy, I said. Happier than I ever thought possible. It was true. My life with James was everything my life with Derek had never been. Balanced, joyful, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. We had two beautiful children who were growing up seeing what real partnership looked like. We had friends we socialized with equally, not one person's friends taking precedence over the others. We had a home filled with love and laughter instead of resentment and unspoken longings. Most importantly, I had myself back. Not the diminished, desperate version of myself I'd become trying to earn Derek's love, but the confident, complete person I'd always had the potential to be. Sometimes late at night, I thought about my previous timeline. About the years I'd wasted hoping Derek would suddenly wake up and realize he loved me. About the wedding I'd planned around another woman's schedule. About dying alone while my husband comforted the woman he actually loved. And I felt nothing but gratitude that I'd been given the chance to rewrite that story. But the truth was, I hadn't really rewritten anything. I'd just made different choices. Choices I'd always had the power to make, even in my original timeline. The only thing that had changed was my clarity about what I deserved. 10 years after calling off my engagement to Derek, I was giving a speech at a women's conference about building confidence in the workplace. During the Q&A, a young woman asked me a question that stopped me cold. How do you know when to fight for a relationship and when to walk away? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw my younger self staring back. The desperate need for validation, the fear of being alone, the willingness to accept crumbs and call it a feast. You walk away, I said slowly, when you realize you're fighting alone. When you're the only one trying to make it work, the only one compromising, the only one bending yourself into shapes that hurt just to fit into someone else's life. But what if they're just going through a hard time? The woman pressed. What if they just need patience and understanding? Everyone deserves patience and understanding, I agreed. But not at the cost of your own well-being. Not when you're setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. How do you know the difference? I thought about Derek, about the years I'd spent telling myself that if I was just patient enough, understanding enough, accommodating enough, he'd eventually see my worth. You know the difference, I said. When you realize that real love shouldn't require you to prove your worth constantly. Real love shouldn't make you feel like you're competing for attention or affection. Real love should feel like coming home, not like running a marathon with no finish line. The audience was silent, many women nodding in recognition. I spent years in a relationship where I did all the emotional labor. I continued. Where I bent over backward to accommodate my partner's needs while mine were dismissed as unreasonable. Where I was told I was too sensitive, too jealous, too demanding, when all I wanted was basic consideration and respect. What made you leave? Someone called out. I imagined my future, I said simply. I imagined spending my life feeling like I wasn't enough. I imagined teaching my children that love means accepting whatever scraps someone is willing to give you. And I decided I deserved better. And did you find better? I smiled, thinking of James waiting for me at home, of our children who were learning what healthy love looked like, of the life I'd built on a foundation of self-respect rather than desperation. I found extraordinary, I said. But first, I had to believe I deserved it. That night, I came home to James cooking dinner while our kids did homework at the kitchen table. He looked up when I walked in, and his entire face lit up, the same way it had every day for the past 10 years. How was the conference? He asked, pulling me in for a kiss. Productive, I said. There was a young woman there who reminded me of myself at that age. Oh yeah? What did you tell her? To believe she deserves better than someone who makes her feel like she's not enough. James looked at me for a long moment. You've come a long way from the woman who didn't believe that herself. I had good motivation, I said, thinking about the life I'd left behind in my previous timeline. What motivation? I finally understood that the worst thing that could happen wasn't being alone, I said. It was spending my life with someone who made me feel alone anyway. James pulled me close. I'm glad you figured that out. Me too, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Because the truth was, I hadn't just been reborn that day I woke up before my engagement. I'd been reborn the day I called it off. The day I chose myself over the comfortable lie. The day I decided that being alone was better than being lonely in a relationship. The day I finally believed I deserved to be someone's first choice. And that rebirth, the one I'd chosen for myself through courage and clarity, was worth more than any supernatural second chance could ever be.